Hallelujah. Okay. So to for today, and we are far behind time, and then we apologize for that. But we hope that we can introduce the topic, and then hopefully in the subsequent weeks we'll be able to exhaust the topic. So today we are treating the youth and education, and we are glad that today we are not discussing it with none other person than a professor in who has been a professor in education. Like he's been in the educational field, and he still calls himself a teacher anyway. So we are glad that um, we have him on board today on the panel to discuss this particular and very important topic with us. So before we even go on, I would want you to share it with a friend. Go onto Facebook, go onto YouTube, share the link, go to Taylor Generation Chapel on Facebook or YouTube and log into the video, and then share the link with a friend or with a family. Share it with someone and let them also benefit from today's discussion. And while the discussion is going on, you can send in your comments. All right. If you have a question, send it in, and then let us. You would ask the question in real time. If it comes now, if it comes later, too, maybe we would attend to it later. But then leave your comment on our platform, Facebook or YouTube, and we are going to read them in real time. Or if you are watching it after the program is over, someone will also be blessed. All right. So let me go straight to our panel member. He would introduce himself briefly for those of you who are joining us for the first time, and then you kick off. So you're welcome to today's.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So for the sake of those who are joining us for the first time, they would want to know.
Okay, my name is Noel. I ordinarily will live in the United Kingdom. I live in a small city called Oxford. I attended school there. I taught there for a while. I'm a professor at University of Nottingham, which is also somewhere in England. I teach accounting and business. I also train lecturers who are starting their career and help them to build up their career. That's what I do.
Oh, wow. It looks like we are in good hands this evening. If you teach lecturers, then I think for we students, we are in good hands then. All right, so today, as I said, we are discussing the youth and education. So before we get the ball rolling, could you tell us, when we say education, what does it entail? What is the entirety of education?
Okay. So when we talk about education, we are talking about moving people on in their knowledge. So we help people to know something about an area that they are interested in. So what I normally say to my students is that when you come to me, you are ignorant about a lot of things. By the time you leave me, you are no longer ignorant about those things. You have some knowledge about those things. So it involves imparting you, so that even when nobody teaches you, you are equipped with the tools to look out for the things that are around you and to learn something about that. And then finally, in terms of education, education is not complete when what you have learned, you have not spoken to somebody about. So it entails you being able to also share with other people the kind of things that you have learned and to persuade them that things are okay. Let me end with a quote from a poet called W.B. Yeats. He talked about the fact that education is not like the filling of a bucket, but it's the lighting of a fire. Okay, so W.B. Yeats say, education is not the filling of a bucket, it's the lighting of a fire. And what he's talking about is this. You see, if you think about education only about the filling of a bucket, you are focusing on the content of education, what you're learning. But when you talk about education as the lighting of a fire, it talks about the passion that you have, that education should inspire you rather than just fill you with something. So it is what we call head, heart, and hand. So your head does the thinking, your heart does the passion, your hand does the doing. That's when all the three things come together to form education.
Amazing. So you mentioned four things: gaining knowledge, the application of knowledge, the curiosity about knowledge, and then
The
sharing
communication of knowledge.
communication of knowledge. Amazing. So are there any other? Okay. So let's now focus on the importance of education in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the importances that we get through education?
No, without education, we are just ignorant people. That's all. I mean, in fact, without education, we would have still been walking around naked or in animal clothing around us. We will not have been able to develop in terms of medicine. This wonderful tool that I have in my hand, nobody would have been able to do something about it. So education results in personal development for ourselves, So it moves us away from being ignorant and into becoming knowledgeable about things to be able to respond to things. But also not only personal development, it leads to national development or the development of the community. Education transforms us. So if you look at Ghana, for example, Ghana became independent country in 1957. In 1957, we were at the same level of development as Malaysia, as South Korea, and a few other nations like that. Now, shortly after that, Malaysia and Singapore split into two countries. And if you look at them, particularly Singapore has very little in terms of wealth. All it has is a strategic location where ships and other things come there. If in 1957 you looked at Singapore, particularly, and South Korea and Ghana, and asked which one would develop more than the other, you'd have said Ghana, because we had a lot more than that. But they have moved way ahead of us, and the difference was education. The difference was education. So that is how come it is useful that we have education there. Now, I have a PhD student who is working, a PhD student is somebody who is working on his doctorate degree. I'm the supervisor of that person. And we are looking at how the economy in African countries function. And one of the first things we found out is that those who are developed more economically are those who have paid attention to education. So not only does education help the individual personally, but education helps a country to advance. There was a time that I attended an interview somewhere in Washington, D.C. For a job. And the person asked me, whether what I was doing was socially useful to countries. And I was in education at the time. So I asked him whether he knew whether I was in education, and he told me yes. And so I asked him, where would you be sitting where you're sitting without education? And he said no. So then I said, you are my social usefulness. I mean, because without people like myself, you won't be able to sit there. So education is really very important. But I like to stress that education is not the same thing as schooling. When school is one avenue by which you can educate yourself. But there are people who go to school who are nevertheless uneducated because they have not used school to be able to acquire knowledge, apply the knowledge, disseminate the knowledge, or be curious about knowledge. And so in those people, they are, in that sense, they've not been educated at all. But there are also people who have never been to school and have learned by themselves. So we talk about self-educated people insofar as that is concerned. And for many of you, you will leave school and might not enter a classroom ever again. It does not mean that your education stops. And so I say to people, you've got to continuously learn. And the three words I use is you learn something. When the thing becomes irrelevant, you unlearn it, and then you relearn something. So learn, unlearn, relearn, learn, unlearn, relearn, all the time. You need to be learning new things because otherwise the world will pass you by. knowledge is changing very fast, things are changing very fast. So for you to keep pace with that, you have to learn. And if you are in any profession at all, we have what we call continuing professional development. You have to be the type of person who is keeping pace with the changes in knowledge. If you don't keep pace, then if you're a doctor, for example, you start killing your patients. I mean, no doubt about that. And so those are some of the things that education entails, and that's why education is important. Once again, I like to stress, it transforms people, individuals. It transforms economies, but it also transforms society that people live in.
Amazing. All right. So I would want to mention that if you have any question, you can jot it down or put it on our platform. If you jot it down, I'll give you the opportunity to ask him and Prof directly on the panel while the discussion is going on. Okay. So you put it down while the discussion goes on, and then I'll get back to you. All right. So I like the part that you talk about it transforming the individual first, and then his community, his country, and then so on and so forth. And I also like the point that education is not necessarily schooling. Schooling is just an avenue.
Yes,
to be educated.
yeah.
That's what you said.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Now, my question is that, my next question is, we've heard the saying that education is the key to success. And I read somewhere once, some time back, that for Ghana, when you finish schooling, you realize that after you have the key, the system, the government has changed the padlock. So your key cannot even open the padlock to your success. So, but my question is that, is education really the key to success? Can someone still not have education and still be successful?
Education is the key to success in every form. And that's why initially I made the distinction between schooling and education. So when people talk about education being the key to success, people are hearing that schooling is the key to success. And that's not necessarily the case. And so you've got to draw a distinction between that. So who are those who are successful? I mean, you might measure success in different ways. So for some people, it's whether or not you make money. So the Americans would say, if you are smart, why aren't you rich, for example? And I have never seen somebody who is wealthy in a consistent manner without being educated, not necessarily without being schooled. I'm drawing a distinction there. Because the person who is educated has some knowledge. You see, I'm picking up, if you like, success. Okay, I'm saying success for some people might mean wealth. Okay, so I'm just giving one example of that. How do you make money? Really, it is when you have some knowledge or something that somebody needs, and that person will give you money in return for what you have. And often, what you have, you either acquire through knowledge or you retain that through knowledge. So, for example, I can give you some money. And if I give you money, even if I give you several amounts of money, and you do not have knowledge and the ability to make sure that you retain it, then the money is going to fritter away. You will not be able to retain the money. And so even when money is given to you to start with, you'll not be able to sustain it without some form of knowledge about what to do with the money. For some people, like myself, I mean, all my dad gave me was education. In fact, what he used to say to me was that if I leave you something, then you do not have education, you will not be able to retain it. And one of the things he kept saying is that a tool in the hands of a fool is useless. But because education turns you away from being a fool into somebody who is knowledgeable, then you can use whatever tool you have to do something for yourself. So if you think about wealth, education is helpful in making wealth if you're so inclined to be able to do that. I'm saying not schooling because you use the analogy that when you finish school, then the key is changed. Sometimes I see many people who are in school or who leave school who aren't educated. And so, for example, quite recently, there was an issue of a young lady who was complaining that in the national press that she was unemployed. And when I read her story, she said she was working, she's graduated from university, she was still working for her mother who had a bakery and so on. So somebody kindly passed on that young lady to me. And so I kind of asked her, in the bakery, what do you do? And she told me what she did. And I said, aren't you employed? And he said, oh, but that's some kind of employment. And I said, well, what did you learn at school? And she told me. And I said, couldn't you apply what you have learned to move your mother's business forward so that it is no longer the kind of bakery that it is, but it probably will be an international bakery. We'll probably introduce new product lines and things like that. And all of a sudden she said, oh, but I'm employed, actually. And I could manage my mother's business and do some things like that. She saw herself that success in education will be somebody employing her rather than her taking what her mother has and improving upon it. So sometimes that is also the case. But think about whatever that can happen in the world happen via education. So we ride in cars, education. We eat food. Those who know how to prepare good food have been those who are educated. And again, I'm not talking about schooling. Because, you see, in our own traditional system, mothers educate their children. Daughters in Ghana mostly, but if you live abroad, it's sons and daughters about how to cook. So, for example, in my home, I have 3 sons. And all of them will know how to cook. I mean, that's end of story. If you're not going to cook, I'm not going to cook for you. I mean, and by the way, I know how to cook. For those of you who have any doubt about that, I can prepare a whole raft of Ghanaian food and this. But what I'm saying, even cooking is there. If you take things like this, if you take the electricity that we have, if you take the camera and the photography, nothing happens outside of someone learning how to do something and so on. Without education, everything that will come will just be by chance. And when things happen by chance and you don't learn out of it, you forget it. So that's why we say that education is the key to success. Let me address the issue for people who come out of universities and school who don't have any jobs to do. I sympathize with you. It's not something that we treat as trivial. And I hope that any politician who kind of happens to be listening to this, you pay attention to the fact that in our youth, that is where we build the most that we have. We know from research that your most productive years ever on earth will be when you are between 25 and 35. Oh, wow. That's your most productive years ever. Everybody who had won a Nobel Prize in chemistry, in physics, in economics, and everything, their most productive years were those ones. The Nobel Prize was won when, about work they did in those years. If there are few people who are not that productive there, they are what we call late bloomers. But everybody, that's what you do. If I look at my own life, everything that I know now, the foundation that I built was built between years 25 and year 35. A lot of what I'm doing now is leveraging on top of it, refining it, adding something to it. But that is your most productive years. So if in your most productive years, you do not have work to do, in terms of somebody employing you, then that's quite tough. But then I'll say that don't wait for somebody to employ you. I mean, nobody's employing you. You're home anyway. You're doing nothing. So find something to do once you're at home. It might not be the best thing you want to do, but you might just land into something unawares and use your knowledge. And every knowledge that you have, use it. At the very least, you can write something about it. You've been taught how to think. Use that knowledge to think. And just find something to do with the knowledge that you have. You know. Once again, please don't just get schooled. Get educated. Let me just say one last word about something. So you remember in the Bible, the disciples of Jesus were relatively unschooled people. They hadn't been to school for a lot of time. And they came into contact with those who had been in school a lot of the time. And when they spoke, the guys had a look at them and said, "These guys, you know, and how did they get the knowledge?" And then they said they took note that they had been with Jesus. Their education was with Jesus. They learned from him. They learned to apply what he said with him. They learned to say things about what they have learned from Jesus with him. They were curious about various things because of Jesus, you know. But although they saw them as what they called unschooled idiots at the time, in the Ghana we'll say bulu nile ulumi. That's what we call it. Unschooled idiots. Although they called them unschooled idiots, they took note that they had been with Jesus. In other words, that they had been educated by Jesus. So it doesn't matter what you think about some of those things. Hey, be educated, whether in school or outside of school, and you'll find the benefits to it.
Wow, thank you very much, Prof. And I like the way you are stressing on the fact that schooling is not necessarily education.
Not at all.
Okay. There are some comments here, so I'll go through them and then we will take our last question. All right, so Caleb Otin Bentim says that good stuff for the youth and all who aspire to make a difference. Grace Equia says that education is not the same as school. Deep statement. Cheryl Labo says that education is not the same as schooling. You may attend school and still end up not utilizing the information and knowledge made available to you. Joe Fletcher Abington says, education helps in both personal development and national development. Thank you for the insight, Prof Noel. Reverend Fred Abu says that learn, unlearn, relearn, the mantra of education. He goes on to say that don't just get schooled, get educated. I hope somebody will put this on his status. That don't just get schooled, but get educated. Hallelujah. All right, so I'll give you the opportunity to ask a question, and once we close the session, if you have any questions quickly, I know most of us, if you are not still in school, at least you've passed through school before. So you might have a question, buckling in your mind. So any question, one or two questions we'll do and then we'll move on. Please, anyone has a question? All right. Okay, if there's no one, then I'm going to ask my last question, and then we will take it from there. All right, so Prof, you kept on hammering the fact that people can go through school and still not get educated, and so invariably you are saying that people can also not go to school and still get educated, especially with the example you gave with the Jesus and his disciples. So for people who didn't have the opportunity to be in school for a long time, maybe at a point they had to drop out because of money issue or because of one thing or the other, and up to now they think that they are disadvantaged or they are not privileged to have a degree or to have a double degree, a master's or a PhD or something. So they are looking down themselves. What message do you have for people like that?
Okay, so if you're a young person, I remind you of what Paul says to Timothy. He says, "Let no one despise your youth, but set the believers an example in love, in speech and in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. So no matter what your station in life is, you're a human being. You're loved by God. Christ died for you. He will redeem you, and he will transform you, and he will take you back with him to himself, that where he is, you'll be forever if you're one of his. That is key. That is important. Don't look down on yourself ever. Nobody should make you feel that you're second class. So that's a foundational statement we'll make. The second statement I'll make is that once you are not dead, and once you are alive, there are a lot of things that you can do to make sure that you improve upon yourself. And the key thing about education is self-improvement. You have to improve about yourself and then do something. So if school is an avenue through which you can improve upon yourself, that's okay. And these days, there are several things that you can do in terms of school to improve upon yourself. So for many people that I know, it's just YouTube, for example. Whatever you want to know, there's somebody on YouTube who is saying something about what you want to know. So spend some time and consistently and diligently study something. You see, as for excuses, all of us have it. Excuses are like, let me use a more polite term, are like noses. Everybody has a nose, and so everybody has an excuse. And so you can always say that, but I didn't have the chance, and so on and so forth. That's fine. I think that you can catch up. There's so many avenues for learning and therefore to be educated. What it takes is diligence and discipline. Okay. What it takes, again, is what I call diligence and discipline. Diligence is you're sticking to it, you want to do it. Discipline is that nothing will shift you away from that. So if you decide that I'm going to learn something and I'm going to stick to it and I'm going to find where I can learn that thing. And these days, maybe apart from your data, the money to get your data, you can learn any and everything, elsewhere. And in the past, people have been like that. So I give you the example. Most of you would have heard about Abraham Lincoln, for example. If you haven't heard about Abraham Lincoln, you are uneducated in my view. Anyway, so you better get an education. Abraham Lincoln is important, and not only to Americans. He was one of the American presidents. If you look at the dollar bill or the dollar note, Abraham Lincoln is on one of the dollar notes. And it's important to those of us who are blacks, mainly, and this is education coming your way for free, by the way, because he was the one who emancipated slaves who were mostly blacks in America. Abraham Lincoln wasn't schooled, but he was educated and he became a lawyer.
Oh, wow.
So those are it is an example of someone like that. And one of the most amazing things that I learned was a man in one of the universities that I'm not giving the name of the university, but those of you who know the universities I've taught in would guess who it was. So I entered into a particular university to teach, and then the first graduation that I faced was a 93-year-old man who was graduating and had a first class in mathematics. 93-year-old man. And so I kind of got interested in him. So I asked him, why would you go to university and go and work and work and work and then come back and go to university again and get a degree in math? And he says, I've never been to a university before. I stopped school when I was 14 years old, and I've worked ever since that. And I'm like, this kind of university that I'm talking about, only few people in the world managed to enter into that university. So how come you got there? And he said, my wife died when I was 87 years old. The doctors told me that if I don't do something with my life, I'll follow her within the next 18 months. So I started coming to this university. In most universities, they hold small lectures. We call those extramural activities. Mural is wall, having something to do with wall. Extramural is those outside of the walls of the university are given a chance to come and listen to just a small talk of a kind. So he kept coming. And then he got a confidence to start asking questions. And then one of the professors who was giving a particular lecture said to him, you seem very knowledgeable. What school did you attend, etc.? He says, I didn't attend any school. The guy said, I don't believe you. He says, well, everything I've learned from life, from the school of life, okay. So the guy encouraged him, says, would you want to try going to university? He said, me? University? How? I left school at age 14. And by that time, that was 70-something years since he had left school. Never stepped into a classroom before. And so the guy said, you know what? We'll give you an access course of a kind. So an access course is, you're not going to take examination. You're going to learn a bit to get to the stage of those who are going to enter. And he got there. He got so he started university at age 90. And his great-grandchildren were sitting in class with him because in that university you come in at age 18. And he topped the class. From that day onwards, I said to myself, until my dying day, even when they are putting me in the grave, there might be something I could learn and take with me to eternity. So, and that's what education for me is all about. So please, I don't say that you are not privileged enough to learn something. Make the opportunity, make the time to learn something. We learn from our friends. Please look at the friends that you form. Who can you learn from? Who can drive you on for you to learn something? Just keep learning. My last degree that I took at the age probably at 40-something or thereabout. And I talked about a PhD student of mine who is working on something. He's older than me. He's already 60 years old, or 61 this year, actually. And he's going to graduate next year when he's 62 years old. But he's still in school. Some of you are so young. Literally babies when we think about... you have the whole world ahead of you. I'm saying that please make use of that. Nothing should stand in your way. Let me end with what Jesus said. He says, knock. As he says, seek and you will find, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find, knock and it will be open to you. In terms of education, just ask. You ask the questions you want to ask, you get a knowledge. Wherever the knowledge is hiding, seek, you will find. And when Jesus says knock, I do not think I'm better than Jesus, but let me add something to it. Don't just knock. Just tear the door down. You will get the knowledge that you need. Break the door down. Let no one stand in your way, because it will transform you personally. It will transform your family. It will transform the community within which you live, and so on. May I just give one last example, because that's more contemporary example, and that's more about ourselves. So I live in the UK, and in most of you who aspire to go and live in the West, part of what you don't know is that when you see somebody, when they see somebody the color of my skin, they will discriminate against you, either overtly, openly, or in other ways. Okay. So several years ago, when I was finishing my first doctorate degree, a Ghanaian friend of mine called me. And he said to me, Noel, now you finish your doctorate degree, what are you going to do with it? We are sweeping. And the guy just wanted to make fun of me, actually. He says, you got a big PhD, you are coming to sweep like some of us. So what's the use of your PhD? And then I said to him, and this is a Christian brother, by the way. And I said to him, then he says, what should we pray for you with regards to a job? And I said, I don't need you to pray for me to get a job, because I have 5 jobs already. Pray for me to get the wisdom to choose the right job. I said I had a job offer from University of Dundee in Scotland, I had a job offer from University of Cambridge. I had a job offer from London School of Economics. I had a job offer from Manchester University, Manchester Business School, and had a job offer for the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign in Illinois in the United States of America. And all 5 of them were good-paying jobs. And so, pray for the wisdom. The guy immediately, you know when someone wants to mock you and make fun of you, and then you turn the tables around, and he's laughing the wrong side of his face, that and the wrong side of his mouth. That's what happened. But to cut a long story short, this guy then decided, I am going to go to school. If school gives you 5 jobs that you have to choose from. And I'm saying that is despite the fact that I'm a black person, and people would normally see me as a black person and say, I'm not sure about this guy. Cut a long story short, this guy went back to school at age 40-something, or 30-something, 40-something, and he's now a big person where he is. I said finally, but let me give you just one last personal example. Again, where people show you lack of respect because of who they think you are, and then they hear about your educational status and attainment and what you are doing, and it changes. There's one day in a small town which I live in, Oxford. I was standing in one of the public squares and I was preaching. And then I was going to call him this idiot, but this is a public distance, so let me not call him an idiot. But this guy came and said, why are you preaching? No, he said, where do you come from? And I said, I come from Africa, from a country called Ghana. He said, oh, okay. He said, no doubt, you guys are very superstitious. That's why you believe in a God who is this and that. And he was talking so much. So I said, you want to have a conversation with me? Let's have a conversation. He said, no, you're not worth having a conversation with if you believe in this superstitious God, etc. And then there's this one some white guys passing, and they called me and said, hi, Professor Tagoe, how are you doing? Are you teaching this gentleman? And then the guy said, you're a professor? Number one, as soon as he heard I was from Ghana, he assumed that this is a backward African who is superstitious, and he's talking about a God who nobody should believe in. As soon as he heard I was a professor, he said, a professor? And he was seeing, not blacks calling me a professor. Okay. His own whites calling me a professor, And it switched completely. And this guy was now, so you're an educated man, you believe in God. And he gave me an avenue to preach to him. Unfortunately, he at the time I left him, he hadn't become a Christian. I hope he has become a Christian. And by the way, you know yourself if you are listening to this. So if you have become, write something on there. We'll rejoice with you, and so on. But that's all I will say. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Tagoe. We wish you'd go on and on, if not for time. So, God bless you for staying tuned with us. I have a question here. Prof, let me just ask you quickly. Greater Kranoma is asking if schooling abroad, especially for master's programming and all that, is it better? And do you have better privileges than if you school in Ghana? The contention there. Could you quickly clear it for us?
No, it's in some ways. If you have all the money, it's better. It's not better. It's a wonderful experience. Let me say that. It's a wonderful experience. Learning in there. The teaching style is quite different. So I'll give you an example. When I was at Oxford University, we never taught in large classes. I wouldn't come and give if I come and give a lecture, I give a lecture. But mostly I have about 5 or 6 students coming into my office. That is how they learn. And so we have conversations about the issues. And by the time I spend 1 hour with them, it's like somebody who has spent 5 hours in a lecture, And they are debating with me. We are talking, etc., and things like that. And when we are there as teachers, we don't see ourselves as knowing everything, and so on. And I come genuinely wanting to learn from my students, and they learn from me. The only thing is that when I learn from them, it's for free. when they learn from me, they have to pay some money. So that's how can we cheat them. There are certainly a lot more resources for you to study outside when you choose to. And I think the system over there um, is, is such that it forces you, or it rather encourages you to speak your mind and to grow personally. And sometimes I've sat in a class in Africa, and I've asked myself, does this lecturer think he knows everything? And I mean, you see, they, some of them speak down to you as somebody who is learning. For example, I mean, I don't know what you're taught in secondary school these days, but I know that when I was in secondary school, I was taught a lot of things. The guy enters the classroom, and today we are going to treat this topic. Is going to do that. And by the way, I had fantastic teachers. I had, fantastic teachers. For my A-level course, advanced level course at Achimoto School, for example, everybody who taught me was fantastic. I'd say that. But many of them taught me without telling me why they were teaching me what they were teaching me. And that is how most of you can get to school, learn a lot from school, and not be able to apply that. For most of my colleagues outside, we will not teach you without letting you know why we are teaching you what we are teaching you. So many of you would have, those of you who've done some maths, done some calculus, and some will say, what the hell am I going to do with this calculus? Let me give you an example. COVID crisis hits, and I approached a certain country in Africa that I can help model the way in which it will go through. And please don't guess which country it is. And the person says, are you a doctor? I said, I'm not a doctor. But this is about epidemiology. It's all about numbers and things like that. If you know your maths, you'll be able to do that. And the person says, what has maths got to do with it? Cut a long story short, I kind of explained to the person that it's about the rate of change between people who are uninfected to people who become infected to people who then recover and things like that. And solving partial differential equations, developing a system of differential equations, solving those ones, you can predict how things are going to be. That's just calculus. It's end of story. I mean, how many of you have learned calculus and you know that that's an application of calculus? In terms of you don't know it. I mean, it's simply not a way in which we teach over here. And I'm saying that, you see, I started by saying education is not the filling of a bucket, but the lighting of a fire. You only light a fire when somebody knows why they are doing something. You inspire the person. If you come, it's just filling the bucket, filling you with knowledge. Number one, you don't know why it is. And number two, you couldn't be bothered. If you know why it is, and that touches you, you can't then be bothered, and then you study. So that's why sometimes there. But I'd say to you, don't devalue your education in Ghana. It's really very good. Because if you studied in Ghana and you go abroad to study, it's as if you are walking in the park. It is easier, to be able to, because you suffered here, and then, so you kind of go there, you don't suffer that much, I'd say. So I'd encourage you, if you ever get an opportunity, to do some studies there. But if not, University of Ghana is fantastic. KNUST is fantastic. I have to mention that because my wife attended KNUST. Cape Coast University is fantastic because I'm supervising a PhD student there. Central University, wherever you get to go, is fantastic. Make the most use of it. And I'm sure that God would honor what you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof Noel Tagoe. I hope you've learned something. So God bless you. If you've learned something, maybe if I would want you to go on our page, on our Facebook, on our YouTube page, and then put there what you've learned. It could be a sentence, it could even be a word. All right. So go and put it there. Hashtag schooling is not education, something like that. Or don't just get schooled, get educated, something like that. Okay, put it there, and then let's reach out to people out there. God bless you so much. We really appreciate your patience and staying with us. We hope that in the subsequent week if you're able to get Prof, we will continue with this topic. So
I'm here another week.
oh, okay, that's awesome. All right, so next week we are going on with this topic. So do well to tune in or be here so that we can have the discussion together once again. But I think I have just two comments here. Reverend Komeno says that what it takes is diligence and discipline. Okay, so God bless you. Have a great evening, and until we meet again, just keep taking care of yourself. And after school, please, schooling is not the end of your education. So let's get ourselves educated. God bless you.
God bless you.
All right. Let's give it up for. What did you say to Paul? Oh, he didn't hear. Hallelujah. But did you learn something?